National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council has reported just under 260 deaths from the onslaught of Typhoon Odette.
It's so heartbreaking to see that they lost their livelihoods, they lost their houses, and magpapasko. So, in the season of giving, parang itinaon na rin namin doon na mag-all out.
More and more groups have launched donation drives to help those affected by Typhoon Odette this holiday season.
The Alagang Kapatid Foundation for its sports sent hundreds of food packs and bottled water to Siargao. The Metro Pacific Investments Foundation will also send relief items as well as water filters and solar lamps to the town of Del Carmen.
Lagi tayong handa, no? We try as much as possible to prepare, no, for these disasters. Pero medyo nagulat din tayo sa extent nitong Typhoon Odette, no? Pero kahit na ganyan, we were really ahead of the typhoon preparing relief packs, no, relief goods for the areas.
Nakakatuwa po kasi ang daming gustong tumulong. Dami po namin nakukuhang calls asking kung paano sila makakatulong, ganyan. Kaya sa lahat po ng nanonood ngayon, sana po kaya natin yung mga may kakayahan po mag-donate, sana ibigay na po natin sa kanila kasi sobrang kailangan nila ng help.
2 days before Christmas and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of our kababayans need your help. For tonight's telethon, we are enjoining fellow Filipinos to keep the bayanihan spirit going para tuloy din ang Kapaskuhan. Let's make it more meaningful by helping the survivors. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko para sa mga nasalanta ng Bagyong Odette. But what do we need to do? We will discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. With us online from Manila, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. In Quezon City, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5. And with me here in the studio in Mandaluyong, Ed Lingao of One News. We start tonight's show still on a somber yet hopeful note for our kapatids severely affected by Typhoon Odette. Let's make them feel the spirit of Filipino bayanihan. You can give to them through the bank account details being flashed on your screen. We'll try to keep that up for a few more seconds. You can also donate through the Pay Maya app. Kung hindi nyo pa po nagagawa, download the app for free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Then use it to scan the QR code on your screen. We will be flashing that QR code as well as the bank account details repeatedly throughout the show so that everyone will have enough time to share their donations.
And also feel free to call our hotline number 868-9335. It will be open until 12:30 midnight to accept your donations. And finally, for Smart and TNT subscribers, you can give donations by texting donate space amount and send it to 3456. You can also send stars on the telethon Facebook Live over at News 5 and 1PH or via stickers at 1PH's YouTube live stream.
Lucy, ito serious question kasi hindi ko alam paano mag-send ng stars sa FB Live?
Okay, makinig kayo. Okay, para sa mga kapatid nating nice mag-send ng stars, i-click lang ang star symbol sa ibaba. Wala ba tayong video dyan? Ito po yung nasa tabi ng write a comment option sa inyong mga Facebook page. At pagka-click ninyo, makikita nyo sa top right corner ng inyong screen kung ilang stars ang meron na kayo. Ito ang inyong star balance. At kung wala naman, may option dito na pumili ng stars. I-drag lang pakaliwa o pakanan para makapili kayo kung ilang stars ang nais ninyong isend. Kung wala ito, i-type nyo na lang ang amount at i-click ang send. Yan.
Pero sa mga clueless kagaya natin, anong gagawa ng stars na yan? What happens when you send a star?
Aba, donation yan, no? Yan ang makakalap nating pledge. ika nga, para pandagdag sa ating pondo para matulungan ang ating mga kapatid na nasalanta ng bagyong Odette. Yan. Alright.
Yun. Maraming salamat, Influencer Luchi. Si Luchi, minsan lang yan magturo tungkol sa social media. Talagang may saysay.
Okay, ako pa napili nyo, no? Galing nyo.
Sa social media pa, di ba?
Expert!
May Facebook ka ba, Lucy?
Okay ba? Okay ba? Kapani-paniwala.
Nagtatawanan tayo dito, pero seryoso ang ang pakay natin sa gabing ito. At the same time, we're also trying to really have positive spirits because lalo-lalo na throughout this day, we've seen so many people contributing at wala pong maliit dito. Kahit anong contribution, malaking bagay po. And to that point, let's bring in somebody who has always been helping. Let's begin tonight with Manny Pangilinan, chairperson of the MVP Group of Companies. Good evening, MVP.
Good evening, Robbie.
Gandang gabi, boss.
Magandang gabi, sir.
Si Manny, Paolo, Ed. Yeah.
Morning.
Good evening. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Good evening, sir.
MVP, every time meron pong sakunang ganito, hindi naman po kaila yung mga foundations throughout the MVP group. They're always there. Pagka may earthquake, almost automatic yan. You're expecting the miners, the engineers to be helping out sa mga nag-collapse na mga building. Parating nandyan ang Maynilad. Ang Meralco is always helping. We're seeing them trying to put up the post. But MVP, I have to start with this. That ironically, we start with that. We keep doing this. Every time something like this happens, what comes into your mind immediately, even before your people, your teams are deployed?
Well, Robbie, because I think to begin with, nobody expected the typhoon to be so severe as it was, as it became, even for us, maybe we were probably a bit, how would you say it,
Laid back.
complacent about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Para bang hindi nabigyan ng halaga yung yung ba parang hindi ba natin alam na napaka-seryoso tong typhoon na ito, no? I'm not trying to blame anyone, but it just came as a surprise, I think, to everybody. As bad as it was, no? Even ourselves, even the Philippine Disaster Relief Resiliency Foundation, I think, was surprised at the severity of this typhoon, no? And so we can only react to it. We were sort of prepared because when we knew the typhoon was coming, automatic na sa foundations namin to prepare the relief goods. Sanay na kami dun kung anong delata, blankets, clothes, they prepare them already, no? Of X number of thousands, so that we know where to deploy them as and when the typhoon hits. But because of the severity, I think we underestimated the kind of inventorying ahead of time that we did, no? So, and to date, we have distributed 13,000 relief packs to the various areas, and there's no limit that we have imposed because it looks like our people are suffering from shortage of food, shortage of water, and we called Manila right away to supply the bottled water. But that's not enough. We know that's not enough. So Manila has got to send at least 2 what they call tank trucks that are able to process or treat the water, so that people have a bigger supply of water in situ, on site, no? In Cebu and in Surigao or Siargao, we don't know yet, depending on the logistics of it, no?
Mr. Pangilinan, you've seen the extent of the damage, no, from images, video. Sa tingin niyo, Meralco is helping to restore the toppled lampposts, electric lines. Sa tingin niyo, how long will it take to fully restore? Kasi hinihingi ng mga tao nun Umiiyak sila, walang kuryente. Wala daw kuryente, walang tubig. Tapos pati yung sa telecommunications, of course, bagsak. How long will it take?
Just dealing with the power, we have two teams already. We have a total of at least 3, if not 4 teams organized over the weekend. No? So the first two teams are already deployed in Cebu City, and in Bacolod. No? They've arrived last Monday, I believe. And they've started to help Beco in Cebu, and I don't know who the distributor is in Bacolod. So it's difficult to give you a timeline. I have not really spoken to our people recently in respect to those two places, but since it's a major city, I suspect that maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it should be normal. No? Part of it depends on the transmission line that also have been destroyed. No? For example, we have power plants in Cebu, and they're all ready they're ready geared up to fire up their plants, including the oil plants that have been called upon to supply some of the power that Cebu needs. No? But the issue is really the transmission lines that throttles down the capacity to supply power to say Cebu City and Mactan. No? So again, I don't know. We don't have any window to the issues of NGCP. No? We're trying to put at least one team to Siargao and Surigao. I think that will be probably take a bit longer than Cebu or Bacolod. I'll try to get a firmer schedule from them overnight. No?
Sa
So, sir,
telecommunications, sir, yung sa cellphone connected.
Actually, we have deployed typically what SMART does is to deploy advanced teams, no? In areas that are expected to be hit by the typhoon. So we've done that, and our people live in container vans that are placed in those sites. No? But then the damage has been more consequential than we had anticipated. So I understand most of the sites are already up and about. No? The problem has been the power connection, right? If we don't have power to fire up the base stations, we rely on generators, but if they run out of fuel, they have to be connected to the grid as quickly as we could, no? So we've appealed to a number of the oil companies to help us supply fuel to our generators, and indeed to the various diesel or oil gas plants oil plants located in the areas. Yeah.
from what you recall, sir, how does this compare with the relief operations also that you had to conduct for Yolanda? You remember that, of course. This was 2013. Does it approximate it, or maybe not, no? Kasi wala naman talagang tatalo doon. But as far as all the operations go.
Well, it is a major effort, Lucy, no? Not quite the same as Yolanda, no? Pero I think the damage to infrastructure parang mas malaki ito eh. In terms of our networks, our telephone network, and the power lines, no, that have been destroyed by this typhoon. Either that, or we just did not anticipate how devastating it was, no. So yun eh, kanya we gotta have better forecasting methods. That's all I could say, no. And as I told you earlier, if you have to either err on the side of caution or you just let it go, right? But I think better that you err on the side of caution or conservatism. I know people will be upset because if the typhoon turns out to be weaker, they'll be saying, why did we have to be evacuated? Why did we have to buy stuffs? Hindi naman pala kailangan. Or you suffer billions in property damage and lives, no? Diba? So, how do you value a life, diba? I guess it should be priceless, you know? Better save lives and err on the side of caution. But I think we have to be better at assessing, di ba? Nakikita mo naman yung typhoon eh. Unlike earthquakes, di ba? Yung makita kung saan kailan o saan darating, di ba?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, of course, a lot of these downed utilities are beyond the franchise area of your companies. But moving forward, looking forward, do we have any idea or any suggestions as to how to make these utilities more resistant to disasters? Because we keep on seeing the same problems over and over again every time there's a typhoon that comes visiting around, especially in typhoon-prone areas. Power lines are down, posts come crashing down, and cell phone networks come out. What could be a good way of making these utilities more typhoon or disaster resistant?
Well, the short answer is put it on the ground, di ba?
Yes.
Put it on the ground. So the question is how much will it cost and who will pay for it?
Yeah.
So you cannot do it in 1 year or even 5 years. You gotta have a long-term plan,
Yes, sir.
10 years, 15 years. So you could, number one, it takes a lot of effort to do this sort of thing. So you may have to focus on the key areas of this country. It will take a number of years to do it. It will cost a lot of money. So the question is who's going to pay for it? Is it
Yes, sir.
Is it the consumer or a bit of both? But you got to have a plan to make the infra more resilient. I thought the mantra was build better, build higher, or whatever.
Right.
Some elements of the telecom network are just vulnerable, like your base stations, your towers. You just have to put them upright, di ba, in
Yes, sir.
exposed areas.
Of course.
And so yun, we just have to make our towers more resilient to be able to withstand, I understand their standards now, higher wind velocity and the like. No? So you got to have a plan, and it's got to be a long-term plan.
Yeah. MVP, I was going to ask, hindi to sa long term, obviously. And it doesn't even go to the point of resilience. I want to ask, dun sa ano mismo, pag tumama na yung salanta, kung ano man yan, now, whether lindol yan o bagyo, and as we said, you've had so many years dealing with this, so many moving parts. Every time your foundations move, you have infrastructure, electricity, water, telco has to go up, and then at some point, the hospital foundations come in, media, of course, also part of that, the communications. Ang tanong ko is, specifically doon sa response, in all of these years, what have you learned that is fundamental to deployment, to improving deployment and immediate response?
I think you have to, as I said earlier, you have to have better assessment of the nature of this typhoon. I think each typhoon is very different from each other, di ba? So you're better able to assess the threat. You know more or less where it's headed, the areas it's gonna hit. So if you're able to do that, whether with better equipment or better skills in assessing the nature of the typhoon, then I think you'll be better prepared and enough warning. And I think media should help because there was not enough, I don't know what the word is, hype within media to say, look, this is more dangerous than it looks, di ba? So everybody was, okay, this is not the typhoon, tough that it's Christmas and all that, no? So parang ganun ang, pati ako, ganun ang attitude ko lang. So it's another typhoon, it's not gonna hit Luzon, di ba? So medyo malayo sa atin. So a bit complacent. But until we realized over last weekend that this is serious. So we had a meeting amongst our foundations over the weekend and say, hey guys, we gotta mobilize for this thing very seriously. Unang-una, very devastating. Pangalawa, Pasko pa ito, di ba? We have to provide a quantum of solace, so to speak, to our people at this time, di ba? So let's get going.
What about coordinating with government, both sa national level and LGU level? Have we improved on that? What's changed? What's improved over the years in terms of working not just with government but civil society across all sectors?
I think it's better. It's better in respect of this typhoon, no, Robbie? Kasi particularly the Makati Med Foundation has done a lot of work with the armed forces, the various branches. So we had good connections with Secretary De Lorenzana and Secretary Nograles and DSWD Secretary in respect of our ability to request for help in terms of logistics principally. So I think it's better than in previous occasions. No? So matulungin naman eh. In fact, over the weekend, Makati Med sent a team of doctors led by Dr. Esguerra to Siargao. And when they came back the following day, they gave us a list of the medicine that they need, no, in Siargao and Surigao City. So we mobilized to do that. And now I just got word today that diarrhea struck Siargao. That's why I
Ako
said,
yun ang-
it's a bit of
So,
medicine. no?
how do you think the fact that this happened in a time of pandemic, did that affect the relief operations in any way? I mean, I would imagine, for example, that there would be donor fatigue by now. Did you experience that? You just wonder, di ba? Kasi ang tagal ng call for help, especially, even before this typhoon. Tapos nag-typhoon pa. Parang doble tulong.
I think part of the problem, Lucy, is precisely the holidays, no? So medyo mahirap
Yes.
to isingin ng mga tao, no? Pangalawa, you cannot have donor fatigue pag ganito, di ba? You cannot, they just need help, period, di ba? So whatever we can do, as Robbie said earlier, from the smallest of help to the biggest of help that we can render, I think that will be appreciated. People will appreciate that. No? So, yun lang. Yung siguro may konting hirap in terms of distribution, our people, but our people go there. We have prepositioned people, we have prepositioned relief goods and the like. Not enough, I must say. That's why we have this telethon to reinforce the funding part of it as well. No?
Sir, balikan ko lang yung building for resilience. Nabanggit niyo yung building underground. Pinupush din yan ngayon ni Vice President Leni Robredo eh. Pero hindi ba delikado siya for earthquakes, for example? Saka kung sa the kind of devastation we are seeing now, dito sa mga wasak na wasak, mas madali ba na umpisahan na mag-build na nga underground?
The answer is yes, no? Because will the infra be better protected underground than exposed? The answer is obviously yes, no? It's not as easy as it looks. Because let's say for Meralco, to undertake putting all of the wires underground, dapat sama-sama na yun eh. Because yung Meralco posts are being used by the companies. They're also being used by all of the telcos.
Right.
Nasabit yung kanilang wires dun eh. So, if everybody puts their system underground, including, by the way, the water concessionaires, no? Because they're already underground, di ba? So, sabay-sabay na yun, then you could share the cost of the infra. But you have to have approval of the regulator. We just cannot do it. Because the capex of Meralco is approved every time there is a regulatory period of, 4 or 5 years. So that's part of your capex of Meralco. So if you want to include that, and I think there have been various proposals to do that in the past, just need approvals.
Hindi naman mataas yung vulnerability to earthquakes. Kasi yun naman ang sinasabi. Kapag nasa taas, vulnerable sa bagyo. Pag nasa baba daw, vulnerable sa earthquake. Ano ba yung masayo?
Masaya yung poste mo, babagsak yun in an earthquake, di ba?
Sa bagay.
Yes, sir.
And
Well,
we haven't seen the big one to this earthquake. There have been scenarios developed by PDRF. There's a big one, I think if I recall, about 70% the info will be out for Metro Manila. And then we don't have an evacuation plan. I hate to be a Cassandra. Here, evacuation plan, natin talaga mga tao, di ba?
Yes.
You know where to put hundreds of thousands of people if an earthquake was to strike Metro Manila.
well, sir, yes, sir. It is a huge undertaking to put all these things underground. Pero let me ask you na rin po, what does it take to get things started, or are we ready to go in that direction?
We should be ready anytime, di ba? And I mean, there's nothing as good as now to prepare for it because we know inherently we are on the path of typhoons. No?
Yes, sir.
We just don't know where it's going to strike and how many, di ba, will visit this country each year.
Yes, sir.
I think luckily before Odette, most of the typhoons were up north, di ba?
Yeah.
So I thought actually it was a good year for the Philippines until this thing.
Yeah.
But I can just imagine the massiveness of the undertaking, getting to coordinate with all these other utilities, para isang hukayan lang ba? Kasi kung hindi, kung iwahiwalay na hukayan, rumble yan eh.
Correct. No, you're right. And because it has got to be buried in the right depth. To Ami's point, di ba? What is the proper depth so that you also prepared for earthquakes, no? Di ba?
MVP, could I ask also about, immediately after a lot of people were asking, bakit walang communications? And obviously, a lot of people, walang signal and so on. But people were asking on the level of LGUs, on the level of sat phones, and they're saying, bakit wala man lang sat phone per LGU? Now, obviously, not all of us, very few of us actually know how the entire infrastructure and ecosystem for sat phones work. It's out of reach for most of us. But how hard is that problem to solve at the level of LGUs?
It's madali lang gamitin, Robbie, because satellite yun, no? So it's impervious to localized kind of disasters, diba? Whether typhoons or earthquakes. You just have to be able to point the antenna in the right direction. And when you buy the sat phone, they'll tell you where to point. I forget, northeast or whatever it is. And at in the aftermath of Odette, we had a huge demand for sat phones, including government officials. So we've run out of sat phones. So we've ordered 400 more for deployment by December 29.
But once it's there, I mean, ayun yung tanong ng mga tao because I don't know exactly, but people were saying there were programs before para magkaroon ng budget for sat phones for LGUs. But they're saying parang, kumbaga, on the capex, walang problema. They can afford to buy it. Sabi nila, may OPEX considerations because they need to maintain the phone, and dun yata napaso yung mga Yun yung po yung tinatanong ko. Not necessarily operating the sat phone, but just maintaining that entire ecosystem of an emergency communication system. How complicated is that to solve?
Well, you just have to buy the sat phones and be ready to face it. There's an OPEX to it for so long as you use it. Yeah, maybe you need to operate it from time to time to make sure that it doesn't, whatever, run out of batteries or whatever. Yeah. But it's there. I can't answer that for the relevant LGUs or the national government. So it's up to them. But we do have sat phones available, and the satellite service is available on a nationwide basis, di ba?
I think, sir, to Robbie's point, I think a lot of LGUs don't realize that it doesn't take much to maintain a sat phone every year. It's only 12,000 pesos a year for your yearly subscription. So it's not really much for an LGU. Yes, it's a lot for individuals, pero for an LGU, it's a small investment for emergencies.
It's correct. How much is a life worth? Diba? It's certainly worth more than your satellite phone, diba? I'm not trying to hard sell you. I'm not a snake oil salesman, right? So
yes, sir. Well, sir, just as an example, a sat phone is half the price of a new iPhone.
Yeah, probably.
That's more. The new iPhones are around 70,000. Sat phones around 38 to 40,000.
Mga ganon, tama. Yes.
How does the fact that karamihan po ng mga affected this time are tourist destinations, no? Siargao, Palawan, Bohol. I mean, how does I'm sure this affects business as well, no? The fact that it'll probably take, what am I dreaming when I say 6 months, for example, to rebuild a Siargao? Some Siargao residents are saying that it will probably take them years to get it back to where it was before the typhoon hit. But how does this affect business, in your view?
Well, the first issue, Luci, is that, nung kasagsagan ng typhoon and in the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of it, the destruction, the loss of lives, and everything else that are somber, to use, again, Robbie's word earlier, are covered well by media. Yep. And then it will be over, to use typhoon words. No? And the second phase, which is the phase of rehabilitation, when the issues are off camera, when it's no longer in newspapers, so you guys, your business, then the aspect of rehabilitation is a longer term issue. It's longer term work. It is less glamorous. But not any less important, diba? Because you have to restore people's lives out there, especially in Siargao, Palawan, Cebu, So that's ano kailangan pag-usapan yun eh. And how can the question of the private sector, what can you do to help? You should invite them to invest and maybe build better structures in Siargao, which is, I understand, very exposed to the elements, diba? So what can you do to help them rehabilitate the place, diba? Importante yun eh. So getting the private sector to help out in the rehab, we were asked to, now we're mobilizing construction materials to provide temporary abode to the residents, to the tourists, so who may still be there, no? So yun ang kailangan pag-usapan, after 1 or 2 weeks, di ba? How can we help to rehab? Kasi we've seen that happen at PBSP, PDRF, the issue of rehabilitation.
Sir, yung impact sa power supply, you think it will be long-term? Kasi ano bang projection nyo sa power demand next year, mag-election? Meron bang impact yon? Are you seeing long-term, considering the extent of the damage? Napakalaki ng lugar na apektado kasi.
Hard to say. I don't think there are power plants affected by the typhoon, as far as I know. No? So you're talking about the demand for power in that area. Maybe. Cebu is a very, very major city for the country, no? So, but I'm confident the Philippines will be resilient. So, and with easing pandemic cases, I think there's a good chance for the economy, taken as a whole, no, to recover. Obviously, it puts probably a dent on economic activity, especially in those areas, no. So, hopefully not, and that's why it's best, even from a purely private sector standpoint, that we restore demand, we put in the rehabilitation help as much as we can, because it helps the business as well if we could get these people back on their feet as quickly as possible.
MVP, obviously you're very, very busy. We know that there's actually a hard stop here because you're overseeing a lot of things still ongoing. We'll leave you the final word for this segment. Baka meron po kayong mensahe sa mga nanonood.
Well, diba, we spoke to both Signal and TV5 about this telethon as a serious way of, I think, awakening our people to the sad facts of this typhoon. And I do hope that my appeal to everyone is whatever help you can give, whether in cash or in kind, will be much appreciated, I'm sure, no? By us, we're trying our best to help, and of course by the victims of the typhoon. No? So, and we should supply some measure of joy and celebration to the victims as much as we can. Yeah. So, but thank you for this telethon helping out. No?
Maraming salamat.
Thank you for starting it. Salamat, sir.
Maraming salamat din po.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat.
Let's make our kababayans hit by Typhoon Odette feel the spirit of Filipino bayanihan. You can give to them through the bank details being flashed on your screen. Kunin nyo na po ng picture. Let's bring that the numbers back up on screen, as well as the QR code. You can also donate through the PayMaya app. Kung hindi nyo pa po nagagawa, download the app for free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Then use it to scan the QR code, again, being flashed on your screens. We will keep flashing that QR code as well as the bank account details throughout the show so that everyone will have enough time to share and to help.
Also, feel free to call our hotline number 868-93355. It will be open until 12 midnight to accept your donations. And finally, for Smart and TNT subscribers, you can give donations by texting donate space amount and send to 3456. You can also send stars on the Telethon Facebook Live over at News 5 and 1PH, or via stickers at 1PH's YouTube live stream.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko ng Pinoy kahit ano pa mang pasakit sa atin dumalaki. Pag-ibig sa ating puso ay mamamalagi na para bang ngiti dito sa ating labi.
Basta ating mga puso ay magkakaritmo, magkasayat, magkarama, yan lang ang hiling ko. Asahan mong tuloy pa rin ang Pasko, maligayang bayanihan, Pilipino. Sarili, alagaan, kapwa itulungan, tuwa'y pagsasaluhan. Nag ng Pasko, tulong-tulong tayo.
Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. Let's make our kababayans affected by Typhoon Odette feel the spirit of Filipino bayanihan. You can give to them through the bank account details now being flashed on your screen. You can also donate through the PayMaya app. If you have not yet, download the app for free on Google Play or the Apple App Store and then use it to scan the QR code on your screens. We'll be flashing the QR code as well as the bank account details throughout the show so that everybody will have enough time to share their donations.
You can also send stars on the Telethon Facebook Live over at News 5 and 1PH or via stickers at 1PH YouTube live stream. Feel free as well to call our hotline number 8689-3335. It's going to be open until 12:30 midnight to accept your donations. And finally, for Smart and TNT subscribers, you can give donations by texting donate space amount and send it to 3456.
Okay, I suppose just to remind our viewers, if you see the QR code, you have to have the app first before you can use it.
Or, mas simple, kunan mo na kagad yung litrato. Kunan mo na ng picture.
Then you can... Mas simple buhay.
Tapos, para hindi na nagmamadali, then download the PayMaya app and then you can donate.
Or you can simply do it by text. Diba? We gave the instructions a while ago, so you don't have to, kung hindi kayo tech savvy, kung naka 3310 pa rin kayo, you can do it via text.
Oo. At saka, Luchi, turuan mo ulit kami mag-stars, Luchi.
Tama na. Ang bagal nyo naman, no? Come on.
Nasa smiley pa rin ako eh. Tsaka thumbs up. Ano ba yung stars na yan, Luchi?
Totoo talaga, ulitin ko.
Ulitin mo, kasi
Sabihin
yung
ko lang
iba,
naman yung stars na yun eh.
yung iba kasi wala kanina, they're tuning in now.
Okay. Pwede kayong mag-donate sa pamamagitan ng mga stars na makikita nyo sa inyong Facebook page. Ito na nga. Para sa mga kapatid natin, i-click lang yung star symbol sa ibaba. Makikita nyo yan sa tabi ng write a comment option. At pagka-click nyo, makikita nyo sa top right corner naman ng screen niyo kung ilang stars ang meron na kayo. Ito ang inyong star balance. Yan. At kung wala naman yan, may option din na pumili na lang ng stars. I-drag lang pakaliwa o pakanan para makapili kayo kung ilang stars ang nais yung i-send. At kung wala nito, i-type nyo na lang ang amount, i-click ang send. Okay.
At may katumbas na tunay na tulong yung stars na yan. Hindi lang yan sa social media. May katumbas talaga yan.
Yan talaga si Luchi. Meron niyang star power eh. Okay? Pero sigurado ko, itong susunod nating guest, alam itong mga stars na to kasi mas takey siya kaysa sa atin. Diba? Okay, we continue our conversation tonight. And now joining us is urban planner and landscape architect, our good friend Paulo Alcazar. And good evening, Mr. Just call you Paulo.
Good evening, Paulo.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Just call me Paulo. Good evening, Ed, Robbie, Ami, Luchi. Good evening, all.
Yes, sir.
Evening.
Sir, we've seen the images of the devastation. We know how powerful Odette was. But you know, given everything that we know about our laws, our building code, what does this tell us about, you know, is it about time to update the building code or enforce the building code in a more stricter fashion? Or where are we missing out? Kasi talagang grabing devastation eh.
Yes, first let me say that a lot of us in my profession were not surprised that this would happen again. Monitoring what has not been learned since Yolanda, and that was 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
There were some lessons learned, of course, in forecasting has improved, as MVP had mentioned, and of course, Maharwood would also attest to that. The forecasting has been much improved, and so we know where it's going to strike and roughly what the path. But we have not caught up with how much climate change has exacerbated the situation in that it used to be that we prepared National Building Code and engineering standards were based on 100-year events. That means a very traumatic event would happen every 100 years. Of course, that has been disproven between the 1970s typhoons and Yolanda, 30 years, and now it's between Yolanda and Odette is 7 years. So the gap between the 100-year events has shortened. So what we have to do essentially is to recalibrate everything and up our standards to be able to cope with what we know is going to come again, and most probably sooner than even the 7 years. So we have to recalibrate everything. Yes.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Paolo, tanong ko lang, no, you've seen images of the devastation, halimbawa, Siargao, no? And kanina may na-interview kami na sinasabi nga na parang hindi nila may babalik to, hindi nila kayang ibalik to unless lahat sila, they all come together to rebuild it. But from an architectural standpoint, tell me, what is a realistic time frame within which we can get it back to at least where it was before the typhoon?
Well, if you tag on the effect of the pandemic, it will take 3 to 4 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay.
We're all debilitated by the pandemic. Nobody has resources.
Yeah.
If Siargao is tourism based, the outlook. I mean, we were just starting to pick up again. A lot of our clients have sent feelers to us to say, umpisa na natin uli magplano for tourism, international tourism to come back in 4 to 5 years. Domestic tourism in 2 to 3 years. And so they were already anticipating that, in fact, everybody's anticipating that would happen as the pandemic, God hopes, will subside. So 2 to 3 years for the domestic, 4 to 5 years for tourism. Siargao, because they don't have resources other than its own economy,
tourism,
other than tourism, will take a much longer. Even Palawan is tourism based, so the rest of their economy will not have enough surplus to fuel the rehabilitation. But the thing is, we were in ground zero in Yolanda. Well, a month, 2 months after Yolanda, a group of us planners went over to be able to advise the local government, and we were part of maybe 4 to 5 groups doing the same thing. We met every night to talk amongst each other, and most of our proposals were roughly the same, as to build back better, to establish the easements, to not build where you shouldn't build, to replan and plan better, and then build better. Going by what we've seen in the last 7 years, nobody has learned that lesson.
Yeah, Paulo, that's actually what I wanted to ask. Gaya ng sinabi mo nga, you were not surprised, and really, media was not surprised. Even MVP kanina was saying, we all feel like Cassandra's here. Even citizens, sa totoo lang, everybody's telling each other, wala naman nagulat. Alam natin, paulit-ulit lang tayo dito. Alam natin kung ano supposedly yung best practices. But, even anticipating Paulo Alcazar is going to be our guest again after another disaster, ayoko naman na yung exasperation mo lang ang kukut-kutin ko. Given that you have also been speaking with LGUs, baka naman meron tayong hopeful story dyan. Is there any LGU? Whether barangay level, municipal level, or kahit sitio level, or kahit man lang subdivision, is there any community that is actually building better nowadays?
Yes, there have been localized incentives and interventions and projects, but a typhoon is regional, is supra-regional, so you cannot just fight it just one LGU at a time, even one Metro Manila at a time. It has to be a full region. And Mahar, like I put it right, we have to look at the watershed areas when we do our planning beforehand, is to look at how we can make our cities and towns, the 1,700 cities and towns, more robust and strengthened, hardened enough to deal with the next one that comes along, and that will be quite soon. judging by what's happened in the last 100 years.
How
Paolo,
long
natatanda... Ay, go ahead. Go ahead.
are there architectural interventions possible? Kasi people are talking about building using domed
Yes,
roofs now,
yes.
no? Saka kanina pinag-uusapan namin yung underground, putting the utility wires
Yes.
and post underground. How feasible is that? Tama ba yun na
Yes,
there are more?
Yes, you can put utilities on the ground. Technology has gotten better. The construction techniques have been better. It's just the resistance. It will take a lot of capital to, as MBB said, to transition into below ground. But it is possible. It is safe. You can deal with earthquakes. You can deal with flooding with underground cabling. And it all depends on how well you plan your city so that you can already know where you need the conduits underground. And because we don't have very coordinated planning, it does not make sense because you don't know where anything is going to be. But if you plan, so we have a failure of planning. You cannot do this underground things because it's very expensive unless you know beforehand. Say like in Singapore, they know 10 years, 20 years beforehand where everything is going to be, the densities of the buildings, the number of people, the number of utilities, the power requirements, the drainage requirements. That's planning. What we have here is all after the fact.
Pero Paolo, you're talking about, say, Siargao. Diba? Parang how do you build better in an island like Siargao? Is that too much to ask to at least, diba, yun na nga, build buildings that are typhoon, anong tawag doon? Typhoon, strong or resilient? Ganun.
We already have a precedent for Siargao. It's Boracay. And Boracay was unmanaged in terms of unplanned. And so you had all sorts of buildings coming up. Nobody was following the National Building Code. And it had to take the whole island deteriorating for government to step in to bring back the utility framework that it's needed by a resort island of that sort. Siargao is not learning from Boracay. I know because we have projects there, and I see all around the same mistakes that the Boracay Boracay Island had made in the 80s and 90s is being made in Siargao. That means the local government has no capacity to look at how buildings are set up, National Building Code standards, even the current ones, which are still substandard because of the climate change, are not being followed because they cannot monitor. So going back to what Ami said in terms of the refuge areas with the dome, yeah, you can have dome, but the problem is to ensure that the pressure inside is equalized so that the wind does not force the roof to come off. So it's an engineering problem. And so a lot of these failures is a failure of substandard construction, not of the engineering, because we have good engineers, we have good architects, we have good planners, but it's the cost cutting. Say it's a government project, and you cannot help but sometimes they are affected by the process of the selection of the contractor, and some people turn a blind eye to things that are substandard, and this is what happens. So it is not a matter of it's a matter of proper construction. The engineering and the design are often very good, and what fails is in the actual construction. And as I tell all of my clients, 90% of the success of your structure is the maintenance afterwards. Maintenance is not in the vocabulary of a lot, of a lot of our government LGUs. And so no matter how strong you build at the start, if you don't continuously maintain the structure, it will deteriorate and it will fail. And that's the other thing that we have to inculcate in our public works.
Okay, Paolo,
Maintenance.
Paolo, we're sure it can only be tiring, and yet we have to thank you and again for not tiring in your lessons and messages and reminders to all our people. Maraming salamat, Paolo Alcazaren.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Once again, let's try to make our kababayans hit by Typhoon Odette feel the spirit of bayanihan. You can give to them through the bank account details being flashed on your screen. You can also donate through the Pay Maya app by scanning the QR codes being flashed on your screen. You can also send stars on the Telethon Facebook Live over at News 5 and 1PH or via stickers at 1PH YouTube live stream. Also, feel free to call our hotline number, 8689-3355. It will be open until 12:30 a.m. to accept your donations. And finally, for Smart and TNT subscribers, you can give donations by texting donate, space, amount, and send it to 3456. That's all for this edition of the Chiefs, but we hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Manny Pangilinan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao and we are One News. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko.